Hello there. This is the latest in my series, How to Run Cyberpunk Red, and for this one we're going over the Session 0 concept. Now, before we dive into the nitty gritty of that stuff, by all means make sure to hit that like and subscribe button so you get more of this content as it comes out in the future, and also be sure to check out the link tree in the video description that has links to all of my stuff on the web. If you want to support me in other channels, it's greatly appreciated. Session 0 is a concept that has come about probably within the last 10 to 15 years or so in the TTRPG space. And the basic idea is you use this as a session for everybody to get onto the same page, but for a game like Cyberpunk Red, it is very important to set things up not just for how the characters are going to interact, but also how the story is going to unfold and what content is going to be involved in the story. Now, this isn't to say that games like Dungeons and Dragons or Warhammer Fantasy can't have elements that are problematic or potentially cause someone to have anxiety or have a negative experience at the table. Those kind of things can occur. Cyberpunk does fit into those molds of a much darker, more gritty, sometimes more realistic setting. The main concept that you want to utilize with a Session 0 for a Cyberpunk Red game is the concept of lines and veils. So it's basically this. Lines are literally lines in the sand for what subjects will not be discussed or utilized as part of gameplay. So it's a firm line in the sand. We don't cross it, we don't discuss it, we don't even allude to it. Nothing like this is discussed. Veils, on the other hand, are things that can be alluded to in gameplay, but not necessarily shown fully in the course of your game master's description of situations or gameplay elements. For example, if you've played the video game Cyberpunk 2077, you will know about this particular storyline. If you have not, consider this some spoilers, and you might not want to listen to this part. But during the course of Cyberpunk 2077, you meet a character named Evelyn Parker. She's actually the one who produces the heist that your character V goes into. Well, after the heist goes pear-shaped, Evelyn disappears and is soon found to have been systematically abused, first by the Voodoo Boys and then by the owner of Clouds, which is the essentially brothel that she works for. And she is then sold off to a group that makes extreme brain dances and is further subjugated to increasing amounts of abuse. Now, here's what I mean by veils. You as a player are never shown what Evelyn has to endure. You never see it directly. You just see the aftermath of her in this very catatonic state, covered in bruises, covered in blood, and looking very much worse for wear. That's what I mean by a veil. You are alluding to what Evelyn has experienced, but you don't give it a blow-by-blow description. And that's what you would want to do as a game master. So you're not avoiding the subject entirely, but you're also not diving into the gross details of it, because at the end of the day, this is a tabletop game and people want to have fun, they want to enjoy themselves, and no one should have to experience something that could potentially cause them mental distress while they're playing a tabletop role-playing game. And that is something that I would strongly suggest game masters for a Cyberpunk Red game take into account and actively encourage your players to discuss their boundaries and what they're comfortable with, what they're not comfortable with, so that at the end of the day, everyone at the table has fun. You should encourage your players to share with you as the game master what they are comfortable experiencing at the table and what areas of storytelling they don't want to dive into for whatever reason. Now, once you've gotten past that particular part of the session zero, then you can dive into some of the more fun aspects of session zero, which is figuring out how your crew of edge runners work and what type of cyberpunk-esque stories you're going to be telling at the table. Cyberpunk as a genre tends to favor crime and criminality. So you're going to be dealing with heists, kidnappings, maybe assassination missions, theft, all of that kind of stuff. And you want to set up very early on what everyone kind of wants to dive into. Maybe your Edge Runner group doesn't want to deal with, let's say, assassination missions. Maybe they want to deal with just stealing things, or maybe they want to be disaster recovery. That all of those things can be viable for a cyberpunk game depending on the makeup of your group. The reason I suggest discussing what type of cyberpunk genre you're going to be running is because that can then lead directly into character creation, which I'm going to have a whole video on character creation and the various aspects of that, which is going to be rather lengthy, so I'm not going to dive into it here. But if you decide, let's say for example, on recovering artifacts and items from the Fourth Corporate War, which is one of the background events of the current setting for Cyberpunk Red, that may lend itself to one or two of your players maybe creating nomad characters and fixers, or people who try to arrange to gather these kinds of materials that were lost in the Fourth Corporate War. If you're going to be dealing more with heists and thievery, then you may want to work with creating net runners or maybe executives, because there's a go-between with a corporation that your group is working for. That leads into another potential aspect to discuss with the group, which is, are the group, or is the group I should say, going to be a independent outfit of edge runners, or are you going to be working for a major outfit? The reason you want to bring this up is during character creation, there are certain perks and things that you get access to if you decide that you want to work for example, a mega corporation or a military outfit or a crime family. So you want to make sure, is the group going to have everyone on board for working with one of those options, or is everybody going to be working independently as a group and just trying to make their way in the world, which works perfectly well for a Cyberpunk Red game. At this point, you want to dive into character creation, and like I said, that's going to take a little while. Cyberpunk Red has a very extensive character creation suite, which does mean that your average character creation time frame is probably going to run you about an hour, maybe hour and a half. Could be closer to 2 hours if this is the first time that you're running Cyberpunk and you want to dive into things. But it does allow, especially if you're doing it at the table with everybody together, you can start to build the camaraderie with the group so that everyone's on the same page about how everybody knows each other. Because one of the things about Cyberpunk is that you want to make these stories personal. You want everybody to be roughly on the same page and have a cohesive idea of why this group of ragtag individuals who are just trying to survive have decided to come together and realize that survival as a group is easier than survival as individuals. What's the catalyst that brings everybody together? These are the kind of questions you want to ask when you're building this group and everybody's building their characters out. That is it for this episode of How to Run Cyberpunk Red. Once again, if you like my content, please hit that like and subscribe button. It is greatly appreciated, and have yourself a wonderful day.